Hey everyone, it's Miss Turnbull here with your Thursday video. Today we are covering the solving of triangles. So this is our last trigonometry lesson. This is putting everything together and talking about how we can solve for all of the angles, all of the sides, every bit of information about a triangle. So let's review a couple of things really quickly. So you'll recall from the earlier videos that we talked about how all angles in any triangle will add up to 180 degrees. If two angles are known, we can solve for the missing angle by using subtraction. Then you will also remember the trig ratios. Tan theta equals opposite over adjacent, sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse, and cosine theta equals adjacent length over hypotenuse. Let's do a couple of examples that help us remember the things that we've covered earlier, and then we'll get into two example triangles that we need to solve. So this one asks us to calculate x for each equation. So this one here, we've got x on the top, and we remember that if x is on the top, we're going to multiply. So we're going to take this, a calculator, and we're going to say, okay, we need to find the sine of 43. All right, it's 0.68199 and so forth. And then we're going to times that by 12. That gives us a side x is 8.18. It wants it rounded to one decimal place, so x equals 8.2 in this case here. This one is using cosine. And because the x is on the bottom, now we have to divide. So we're going to say, what is the cosine of the angle that is 18 degrees? Since it's 0.95, we're going to say, okay, 12 divided by that number. Whoop, my calculator just canceled out on me. Let's try this again. So the cosine of 18, and we're going to say 12 divided by this number. Gives us 12.6. So x equals 12.6. Okay, pretty simple. This is review from the previous videos. Last review bit, and then we'll get into the actual triangles. It wants us to solve for a. This time we're solving for the angle, and we remember if we're solving for an angle, we need to use the second function. Okay, so that means that we're going to go tan -1 of 5/4. So 5 divided by 4 is 1.25, and then we're going to use the second tan function that tells us that that angle is 51 degrees. Angle A is 51 degrees. Okay, so this is again just review from the previous videos. Now let's get into a couple of questions. We're going to review a couple of things again, and then we're going to get into some questions where we can practice solving for a whole triangle. So to solve for a triangle, we must solve for all sides and all angles. In order to do this, we can use the trig ratios. Remember SOHCAHTOA. We can use Pythagoras. And we can use the rule that all angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So for this one, we have to solve for the following triangle. It wants sides to one decimal place and angles to the nearest degree. So here we have a reference angle of 48 degrees, and we have its opposite side. So we can either solve for the adjacent side, or we can solve for the hypotenuse. In this case, I'm going to use sine, and I'm going to solve for the hypotenuse. So remember that sine theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. So sine of 48 equals 17 over x. X is on the bottom. We're going to have to divide. So let's do that. So we need the sine of 48. And then we're going to say 17 divided by this number. and that tells us that our hypotenuse is 22.9 centimeters. Now, we can now solve for this side using Pythagoras. So remember that Pythagoras says that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. In this case, we've just solved for c squared, and we're looking for a squared. So a squared is going to equal c squared minus b squared. So it's going to equal this 22.9 squared minus 17 squared. We'll go back into our calculator. We're going to square this. And then we're going to say, okay, now what's 17 squared? So this one minus 289 tells us that a squared is 234. I'm going to extend the page down here. So a squared equals 234. We have to square root to get a. Oh, it's not going to let us do this in this. So we'll just square root it over here, and we get 15.3. Okay, so now we've solved for all of the sides. This one is 22.9. This one is 15.3. Last, we need to deal with the angles. And we've got one angle left. 48 degrees over here. We know this one is 90. And what we can do is just say, okay, 180 minus 90 minus 48. And that tells us that our remaining angle is 42 degrees. I'm just going to call that angle X. So angle X equals 180 minus 48 minus 90, and that tells us that it's 42 degrees. Okay, this is all that's involved in solving for a triangle. This is not new. None of this is new at this point. All it is taking everything we've learned in this unit and transferring it over to a question where we're going to solve for the whole triangle. One last example for us to go through. This time we're given two sides. We don't have an angle. So we're going to have to solve for an angle. I'm going to choose angle O. I'm going to solve for angle O. We will also have to solve for angle M afterwards. And we're going to have to solve for side NO. So to start with, I'm going to start with Pythagorean theorem to solve for side NO. Side NO in this case is going to be side A in our formula. So a squared equals c squared minus b squared. So it's going to equal 13 squared minus 7 squared. So 13 squared minus 7 squared, which is 49. That gives us 120. Now we have to square root that. Oh, my mistake. Square root it. 10.95. Does it want it to one decimal again? It doesn't say, so we'll just do 2. So A equals 10.95 centimeters. Now let's solve for angle O. Angle O, we have the opposite and the hypotenuse. Again, that means we're going to use sine. So the sine of angle O equals opposite over hypotenuse, 7 over 13. Now, because we're looking for the angle, that means we need to do the second function. So theta equals sine -1 of 7 over 13. We got to go back to our scientific calculator over here, 7 over 13. And we need the second function of sine. Tells us that that angle, angle O, is 33 degrees. Okay, last bit for us to solve here is angle M. It's our last angle, which means we can do 180 minus 33 minus 90. And that tells us that this angle is 57 degrees. Okay, if you were to decide you don't want to use this for whatever reason and you want to solve it using trig again, you could solve for this angle using cosine. This is the adjacent side and this is the hypotenuse. Okay, so there are a number of different ways you can do it. Whichever way makes the most sense for you, you should try that. The practice quiz will be posted up in about an hour. You'll be able to take a look at that and test yourself on this. But if you've been doing well on the trig stuff up to this point, this should not be different for you. This should just be a continuation. You should knock this out of the park too. Don't forget that if you're struggling, please ask your teacher for help. If you are in my class, please don't forget to send me an email, book an office hours appointment. If you're in Miss Thomas's class, make sure you go to her Google Meets or send her an email. Talk to her about problems that you're having with math. We really want to make sure that you're all successful this year, and hopefully these videos are helping you do it. All right, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you on Tuesday.